So we're going to be in 1 Timothy chapter 6. And we're going to be covering this chapter over 2 Sundays. So we'll just be running through verses 1 through 10. Good morning. Good morning. And then next week, Logan, right? You got 11 through 21. We got plenty of time, so we folks a minute to get settled. The way I'm going to facilitate this morning is I'm just going to ask questions. I've got stuff here to back up in case we don't get a lot of responses, but it's better if you all respond. Okay. I can depend on a few people, right? Right? Yeah? Okay, yeah, I'm looking at you. Yeah. We'll let come back in a second. What we're going to do to start is we're just going to read through verses 1 through 10, and then we'll go back over things. We'll start to ask questions and kind of go to lesson that way. So, you want to start? Cole, you want to start? Verse 1. 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 1. And we'll just go down the line all the way through 10.
Let as many bondservants as are under the yoke count their own masters worthy of all honor, and of the name of God and his doctrine may not be blasphemed.
And those who have believing masters, let them not despise them because they are brethren, but rather serve them because those who are benefited are believers and beloved. Teach and exhort these things.
If anyone teaches otherwise and does not consent to wholesome words, even the words of our Lord Jesus Christ, and as to the doctrine which according with godliness,
he is proud, knowing nothing, but is obsessed with disputes and arguments over words, from which come envy, strife, reviling, evil suspicions,
useless ramblings of men of corrupt minds and destitute of the truth, who suppose that godliness is a means of gain. From such withdraw yourself.
Now godliness with contentment is great gain.
For we brought nothing into this world, and it is certain we can carry nothing out.
And having food and clothing, with these we shall be content.
But those who desire to be rich fall into temptation and a snare, and into many foolish and harmful lusts, which drown men in destruction and perdition.
For the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil, for which some have strayed from the faith in their greediness, and pierced themselves through with many sorrows.
But you, O man of God, flee these things and pursue righteousness, godliness, faith, love, patience, and gentleness.
Okay, we'll stop right there. That's good. Alright, so let's go back and look at verses 1 and 2. If you can pull a parallel to it, 1 Corinthians 7:21. Alright, so verses 1 and 2. Is this an endorsement of slavery?
No.
No? Okay. Why not?
Oh, you have.
Yeah, I need more. Come give me more.
It's just working within the current systems, giving boundaries for the current system, how to be a Christian in the culture.
Okay. 7:21. Okay.
Well, it applies not only to men, but aren't you slaves now whenever you work for somebody? You're paid to do a job, and that was the same thing that a slave was doing.
So
the wages might have not been the same thing, but it's still basically, I mean, you have a little more freedom, you can go home and you can do things, but it's still, your time is bought.
Yeah, so I did some research to find out, like, there were some discrepancies and commentaries on, is this a bondservant? Because in other versions, it is called a bondservant instead of a slave. So is this the same thing as indentured servitude, or is this real slavery where you were treated as property? And in Roman times, it's real slavery. Basically, the Roman law said, I bought you, I own you, and the Roman law allowed for people to be killed by their masters just because. So it's to a greater degree than an indentured servant will be, which is, hey, I've got to work for you until I pay off my tab or whatever, and then once I'm done, then I can go back and be a free person. Once you're a slave, you're a slave. It was very hard to get your freedom after that. So more like the slavery that we saw here in the United States, right? But you're right in a way, right? I was a slave, in essence, for 25 years. I was property of the U.S. government, right? And I mean, when I came in, it was a bit different because it was far more stringent and it was harder to get away with things. We had a guy get masted, captain's mast is when you get punished, because he got a sunburn. He got massacred for damaging government property. Okay? And it wasn't just like a light sunburn. Dude stayed out all day long and got like so bad that he couldn't work the next couple weeks. But that is pretty much what you do. But that is a voluntary thing, right? We enter a contract, we say, for this many years, I am property. But that's probably one of the closer things, at least in this country, that we have to slavery right now. Other countries, it still is like that. There are caste systems, there is slavery. So, what we know at the time is it wasn't an endorsement of slavery. We read in 1 Corinthians 7:21. Right side. Yeah. Can somebody read that for me? Can you see it? Michael, will you get that one?
Yeah. Were you called while a slave? Do not be concerned about it, but if you can be made free, rather use it.
So we know that Paul wasn't saying, hey, you're a slave, just this is where you're supposed to be. If you could be free, then be free. Okay? He wasn't saying that slavery is a system that takes away your freedoms, that it was necessarily the right thing. It's just like you said, Bill. It was a system that was in place at the time, and so we had to work within it. Why didn't Paul ever come out and say, hey, look, slavery is wrong. God gave us free will. This takes away your free will, so we should get rid of the system. There's a few reasons for that.
Well, I think when we see certain things taught in the New Testament, there are extreme examples. And what I mean by that is when you see the persecution of the church and mustache there. And so when you see the persecution, I think there's a reason we read about it in the Bibles that even under those conditions, look what you have to do. In this case, as you pointed out, in our country, we don't have this going on anymore. But in other countries where Christianity is present, this is still very real. And so this is a transcending time and culture type deal that even in those situations, which will probably go on until the end of the earth, is that you still have a responsibility to serve God first, even when you're in that state. Because I would assume it'd be very easy to be like, I'm stuck in this situation, there is no God, and renounce the faith. And I think also to go to this point is the fact of why we have Onesimus and we have the story of him in there is to show what we are that we were all slaves under Christ. And so I think it's in there for an example of extremities so that people can't say, well, the Bible didn't cover this, or not. In that case, it wouldn't be applicable. And it shows it is.
Okay. What else? I'm looking for something in particular. Thinking about what was going on in history at the time, think about a third of the population of Rome were slaves, somewhere around there. So what would it have done if Paul came out and said, hey, look, all you slaves, you should be free right now?
Cause chaos and rebellion.
Is that good for the religion, a new religion?
They already had a target on their backs. That would have been even harder to spread Christianity and the persecution.
So when you're looking at Paul's trying to spread the message, and he's already, like you said, kind of targeting that Judaizing teachers, so they already wanted this to go away. Rome itself probably had problems with it because anytime you have a new religion, it's an issue, right? Because people are going to start to ask for things. So if you started to do all that, you start to cause all this chaos, then you're going to have bigger problems, and it's going to be harder to spread the gospel. No?
The same principle was taught to, can't remember where it is, but Roman soldiers. They weren't told to leave the Roman army. They were told to act as Christians within their role as well. So it's not just slaves. It's the idea of wherever you are, you can be a Christian in whatever role you're playing, with certain exceptions. You know, if you're in sin in the role that you're doing, yeah, don't be in that role. But for example, being in the military or being an employee or a slave of some capacity, you can still fulfill being a Christian in a light-filled world in whatever scenario you're in.
So, looking at that, can you go to Ephesians 6:5? How is it applicable now? Bill, you kind of alluded to it, like we still have slaves today. If you work for someone, you're a slave to them. So what does this say about what we're supposed to do as employees having employers? Or even as citizens of a country with a government that has laws that we're supposed to follow?
You're supposed to obey them the way we would Christ, or in the name of Christ.
Nothing else. So how are you supposed to act towards your employer?
With fear and trembling, and in sincerity of heart.
As to Christ. We serve Christ. serve anybody who's put in a position above you the same way. And what's the reason for that?
So it goes against what most people would do that are not Christians, which is rebel against their employers, talk badly of them, but we're supposed to be different. And like Aaron said, we being not us today necessarily, but then they had a target on their back that would only further the gospel more, because it's not natural to submit to someone who's abusive or to do something you don't want to do on your own.
But ultimately, aren't we just beholden to God? Why should we follow anything that a man says?
You're gonna be a good influence and be a light.
Okay? By following the rules, but doesn't that make us appear to
Well,
be?
if you're following the rules and you're having a good attitude towards things, people see that. The people, your boss will see that when other people are being mouthy and don't wanna do what they're saying, or they're spreading, discourse. If you're like being the opposite of that, that shows. And then you can explain to them why you're like that.
So you're saying people will take notice, and then when they take notice, it gives you an opportunity to then say, this is the way that I am, and this is the reason that I'm that way?
I think 1 Peter 3:15 applies in this situation too. Always have an answer. You go there too. All right.
If you want to, it's up to you.
Which one next point?
Go ahead.
In this is that we always take that be able to give a defense to everyone who asks the reason for the hope that is in you. Even in the case of slavery, it's like, why are you countercultural? Why are you fighting against this? That I serve someone higher than this. And when you serve someone higher than this, it doesn't matter if there's a war going on, you're stuck in slavery, you were in a persecuted state, it doesn't matter. I'm not living for this world. How could Jesus, tell his disciples, the few that were with him at the time that he was taken, was like, look, if I wanted my disciples to rise up, they would. But my kingdom is not of this world. And so you're showing people by your actions, we're serving something higher, Colossians 3:1.
So, with all that being said, should, or was it right for a Christian during that time to own slaves? Still have verse 2 up? Yes. Because Paul's saying right here, and those who have believing masters, let them not despise them because they are brethren, but rather serve them because those who are benefited and believers and beloved. And then teach them to do these things. So, Paul's not saying, hey, if they're a Christian master, then you should get rid of them, whereas as a master who follows Christ, you should get rid of your slaves. Why?
Well, I think specifically since we have Philemon, a Christian master should be the idea of like, you want that kind of master. Why is he like this? Why does he not beat us? Why does he not mistreat us? Why does he do that? I mean, I would imagine masters that became Christians, their slaves follow suit in a lot of ways because they could see this guy's different. Why?
So why, as someone serving a Christian master, wouldn't you think you would just say, okay, well, you should set me free now?
I mean, God allowed the children of Israel to be enslaved for 400 years. And then again, after the invasion of Babylon, anyway, Assyria, and he allowed for that. And I think ultimately he's not too concerned with, and that sounds cold, but maybe that's the right phrase, but he's more concerned with eternity. And he's more concerned with our influence in this life, like I think Margaret said. Who are we going to influence and teach and be able to take, and that might mean that our life is in a different, maybe we're high up in authority or maybe we're low down in slavery, but wherever we are, praise God and teach the gospel. So I think that's the main concern, not to get into social rules and change the landscape of the government at all, but to preach Christ and spread the gospel and spread Christianity, even if you are in those worst situations. And I think that we can see historically that those really low times for the faith was when the church grew the most. Maybe that's why.
So
He didn't say eliminate slavery, but instead, I'm putting you in this position so that you can teach.
So you brought up a good point about, no matter where you are and being subservient and doing what you're supposed to do, and we're not supposed to worry about what's here, but what's beyond. So what is our responsibility? Should we improve these? I mean, we all in this country have the right to vote. Well, those of us who are 18 and older have the right to vote, right? We can, in some ways, affect change, right? So should we even care? Should we even bother? Why do we worry about anything that happens here if we're more worried about the kingdom and the next life, right? Why?
I think it's a combination of things Aaron just said. Yes, we should use our influence. Yes, we should be active in spreading the message of Christ and the things that he stood for and believed in, but at the same time, we can't let that be what stops us from being a Christian. Oh, well, government says we can't do this, we're just gonna have to stop now. So it's a balance between how we can be the best influence within the situations we're presented.
So do what we can while we're here to improve things the best we can for this life, but don't make it our focus.
Kind of, this is on a different topic, but with this is that being a slave at this time is difficult. In a way, if you go to 2 Corinthians, Paul had his own thorn in his flesh that should have made his life and his mind easier to be taken away. But what was the Lord's response is, my grace is sufficient for you. So even in the state of this, it's my grace is sufficient for you. You can make it through. And sometimes the hardships are there and the difficulties ultimately to glorify God. Some of these masters, some of these slaves were there at the right time, I'm sure, to spread the gospel to someone else. The masters, unbelieving masters, I'm sure saw some of the believing slaves and were like, that one's different. He's not talking about me behind my back. Why? Why are you like this? You're a slave. Well, let me tell you about a story. Let me tell you something. So,
Yeah, and it's a good point you bring up, because from positions of subservience, we can affect those who are above us, right? So, okay, we'll move on, verses 3 through 5. Who is Paul talking to here when he says, if anyone teaches otherwise and does not consent to wholesome words, even the words of our Lord Jesus Christ, and add to the doctrine which accords with godliness, he is proud, knowing nothing, but is obsessed with disputes and arguments over words, from which come envy, strife, reviling, evil suspicions, useless wranglings of men or corrupt minds, and destitute of the truth, who is supposed that godliness is a means of gain. Who is he talking to? Paul. Who is Paul talking to? Well, he's talking to Timothy, but who is he talking about?
The letters to Christians.
Well, who's
The same.
during that time, who is he talking about specifically, or who can we kind of think that he's talking about? So I read a few commentaries about different people that they thought that he was talking about, but who do we think he was talking about overall?
You talk about a class of people?
Yeah, a class of people or type of people, like who do we think he was talking about specifically? Because he's talking about people who are saying things against, basically saying like, hey, look, you don't need a master.
Are you talking to slaves? Is that where you're getting at?
false teachers.
False teachers, yeah, that's what it was for. Thank you. But yeah, so, and then more specifically, what I was reading, some of the commentaries saying that it was likely Judaizing teachers who were seeking to say, hey, look, this Christ guy, why are you still slaves then? Why are you still having to deal with all this stuff? And why? Why would the Judaizing teachers, or why would false preachers come out and say things like this?
At that point, everybody was questioning, like, why would you want to change? Why would you want to follow this guy? Why, like, it's just, they're still in a state of trying to figure things out.
Yeah.
So if you see somebody who's in slavery, who's being treated poorly by their master, why would you want to have hope? Why would you even choose that?
Well, and the Jews loved one thing is disputes and arguments. They loved it. The Sanhedrin had to be divided up into multiple sects of Jews. And it's not mentioned here, but in another Timothy letter is genealogies. They love genealogies. Oh yeah, we came Maccabees coming down this way. So you could clearly see what would be that group. But it really applies to any of them, really.
Quote 2 Timothy 3:8, please. He says something here about those who suppose that godliness is a means of gain. What do we know about the Judaizing teachers and their feelings on religion? What do they use it for?
It's their own personal gain.
Personal gain. It was a system of power, a system of gaining wealth and influence that they used. That's how they looked at religion. So, going back and saying, okay, those folks who are trying to cause disruption, it's because Christianity was different. Christianity didn't seek to say, okay, our religion is set up so that we can gain from it. It's the opposite of it. It's so that we can give. We're trying to give. The more we give, we're trying to provide light to this world. So to people who have their entire lives or their entire careers, no, this is what we use to gain power. We've earned these positions of prestige. So they want to dissent. They want to break this thing down as much as possible so that people stop following, so that they get their power back, right? So Timothy 2:8. I'm sorry. 2 Timothy 3:8. Oh, okay. So he points to here, Giannis and Jambres resisted Moses, so do these also resist the truth. Men of corrupt minds disapprove concerning the faith, but they will progress no further, for their folly will be manifest to all, as theirs also was. So he talks again in 2 Timothy here about these people who are trying to change the message or distort the message, manipulate it in such a way to where it's misunderstood, or that it just provides strife. So just sowers of strife, basically. Okay. So now going on to 6 through 8. Can someone read 6 through 8 for me again?
Now godliness with contentment is great gain, for we brought nothing into this world, and it is certain that we can carry nothing out. And having food and clothing, with this we shall be content.
So what do we need? Need being a strong word in this life.
Food and clothing.
Proverbs 15:27. Food and clothing. That's all you need. Maybe some shelter. Nice tent, right? So should we all just become vagrants and live underneath bridges? You got shelter. You go get food. You don't really need to work, right?
Well, it says you need godliness.
In godliness.
And what is part of godliness?
So I can go live under a bridge with a Bible and I'm set, right?
No, that's not what godliness says. Godliness says you need to work. If you want to eat, you need to work for your food.
Okay.
Godliness says you need to treat others like you want to be treated. Godliness says a lot of things, and that's how you need to live. You don't need to live under a bridge. How are you going to proclaim the gospel if you're under a bridge? Living by yourself.
People ride on bridges all the time. It's easy to stand
By
there.
yourself. How are you going to do that?
Yeah. And of course, I'm winding up a little bit. For the sake of argument, right? I'm trying to. It's this thing of what do we need? Okay, so we have everything we need. Most people in this country have everything we need, including the homeless, right? Because we have soup kitchens and all these other services. So, is it wrong to pursue other things? And this kind of moves us into 9 through 10. Somebody read 9 through 10 for me, please? Sorry, I got eyelash on my wall.
But those who desire to be rich fall into temptation and snare, into many foolish and harmful lusts, which drown men in destruction and penetration. For the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil, for which some have strayed from the faith in their greediness, and pierced themselves through with many sorrows.
Should we work to have just enough?
It depends on what you do with your excess. If you work to have excess so that you can help others, there's nothing wrong with that. If you work to have excess to store it up for yourself, then there's an issue there.
I was gonna say, no, not necessarily, because thinking about what Paul was saying in Ephesians, talking about even the ones that steal, don't let them steal anymore, but rather work so they have something to give to someone else. So I think there's an aspect of, even like we were talking about with our excess is simply just resources that can be allocated in different places.
Do you think that at any given time, a person can be in a position of strength and in a position of weakness, and so it's our responsibility to work so that maybe we have more so that we can help those in a position of weakness? Yeah. So that's why I think we continue to work towards having more, not so that we can have more, not so that we can, tear down our barns and build bigger barns, but so that we can have enough to help. But it's important for us to look at things and say, what am I using this for?
That's where the love of money comes in.
Yeah.
You have to set your priorities, and why am I doing what am I doing? Am I making money for myself and for just my family, or am I truly helping other people out? Am I giving money to the church? Am I helping feed the poor? Am I, all these other things that we talked about? Is that the purpose of your life? Or what's the purpose of your life? Just to get money, just to have money?
So should we not have nice things? I mean, this is nice, right? I have a projector, Surface, I got an iPad, phone, all this other, this stuff is nice. Do I need it? First lesson I gave was pencil and paper, and it worked out just fine. Is this helping?
Is it helping you? Is it helping you study? Is it helping you present this lesson to us?
I would say so. I don't know what happened.
It's not helping right now.
Fail. All right, get rid of it all. What happened?
It was helping so much for me.
Oh, it went off. Are we unplug it? Or maybe.
I
Okay.
can hear it still.
Yeah, I don't know what happened.
There it is. Shut down.
A pencil and piece of paper is looking better.
Some poster board and some glitter, right? I don't know what went on. I just shut it off. I'll shut it off. Okay. But it's to your point, right? God wants us to have nice things, right? But not be so comfortable and not need those things. Comfort is good.
Well,
For a time. For a short time.
what God wants us is to be dependent on Him.
Yes.
And not on those things that we have.
And not be focused on gaining those things,
And
right?
realize that those things didn't come from us. Those things came from God.
Yes. See? It's okay. I got you. Look at that. See? It helps. You all want just a little bit more, right?
That was an object lesson, so it's fine.
Do the things that we own end up owning us?
If you let it.
If you let it.
I think one of the best litmus tests of does it own you or do you own it is that can you glorify God through it? That doesn't mean like I got an extra bag of rice. How can this glorify God? Well, maybe in a way, whatever. But what you have been given, because Jesus made a promise that poor will be with you always. There's a sign on 306 that in poverty, it's never going to happen. You're always going to have the poor with you. Jesus made a promise of that. That's showing there's always going to be opportunities to help those less fortunate. Now, can you help people who are above you? You already made that point. To a slave to the master, you can actually help them in different ways. So the question is, are you using, as everybody's kind of alluded to, is it glorifying God? Is it putting focus on Him? Is that what it's going for? Or is it simply the bigger barn to hold the stuff for you so that you feel, I don't have to work? And like Billy said, I guess you're back there, Billy, right? Right there, okay, right there, okay. You know, you have to work. That was the curse of man. You have to work to provide for your own. And the problem with the rich fool was that he was like, soul, I've done everything I need to. I can sit back and relax. He wanted to be lazy. He didn't want to work. And his possessions owned him, and his soul was required of him.
There's a big difference between being comfortable for a time and being complacent. Complacent is accepting where you're at and saying, that's it, I'm good. You know, and sit back. We've had this conversation several times about elders in the church and people who are just like, I've done my service, I'm good, I can sit back, I can relax, and now it's time for everybody to do for me. We are supposed to work from the time that we are cognizant and able to think of how to work to the time we die, right? So, moving through, what is love? I expect that question, right? What's love?
1 Corinthians 13.
Well, 1 Corinthians 13.
Are you asking in this context or in general?
Yeah, probably in this context, but like just in general. Let's start with it in general. No, so yeah, let's go with just in general first. And let's see if we can bring it back. I promise. I got you. So what do you think? What is love in general?
Textbook answer, God is love.
God's love.
I didn't know where you were
No,
going with it.
that's good. Okay.
I wasn't
Let's
trying to
just
be
go a
correct.
few more
I was
steps.
trying to
Okay.
clarify.
Jesus love. Okay. We're getting there. Jesus love. What is the ultimate demonstration of love?
Sacrifice.
Sacrifice. Love is sacrifice. Right? If you live a life of sacrifice and you're constantly giving, then it's okay if you're in slavery. It's okay if you work for a boss who's not a Christian who treats you like garbage. It's okay because what you're doing at that time is you're showing them through sacrifice of your time, which is your life, right? Sacrifice of your funds if you're giving to other people. It's all about sacrifice. That's what love is. And that's what we're supposed to show. That's what Christ showed. We're supposed to be like Christ. You're supposed to show love, right? And I think Caitlin helped me out a lot. Because I was reading this whole thing, and I was like, why? This doesn't make sense, especially when it was the transition between verses 2 and 3. I was like, what is he talking about here, right? And it was this whole thing of, remember that this is an entire letter. We came back in and put all these little annexes in there, and we said this is a chapter, this is a verse. But when you read it, it breaks down to be content, okay, with where you're at, and then show love. We are supposed to demonstrate or show the world what Christ did for us in the best way we can. And we're going to fail at times, but continue to strive to show the light of God through all of your actions, which means don't complain about where you're at, just work with it, right? And if you're in a bad spot, working in a job that you're not supposed to work, that's different, of course, but in all things, show that you follow Christ. All right, so next week we will go through verses 11 through 21. I won't jump to that. I have some notes here, but I'll leave that for you. Okay, that's my gift to you. It's the best I can do. All right. Any other comments?
Well, I was going to say that with Paul, not in this passage, but in whatever state I'm in, I've learned to be content, whether I'm bound or I'm abased, and he goes through the list of that. And the question, and I think it's a good parallel to this, is that the poetry books talk about riches as they have wings like eagles, and they will fly from you. Your trust can't be in that. And how did Paul learn to be bound and abased, whatever state, to be content? Because he was a Pharisee of Pharisees. He had money. He had a position with that kind of education. He had money. And then he went to be a tent maker, not a sought after position. And what is the consistent factor in there? He's not living for this world. And so whether you have a lot, whether you have a little, and it's amazing to meet people like that, because it doesn't matter. They are consistent. They are focused on heaven. And that's really, I think, going to your point, love one another, be content where you're at, focus on the goal. That's what we need to do. And, he'll follow up in 2 Timothy, is like, okay, then make sure you don't do these things. But, that's the kind of the point, is that it doesn't matter what state you're in. Because I think of people, we're very fortunate in this country, we haven't been seeing times of war like prior generations did. And I don't know, mentally, I can't imagine trying to get through those spaces. People, especially people in World War II, like when they were attacking in your communities, where people were being taken from your communities. How do you find contentment in that? Same thing, extremities, that you have to find contentment even in that, and know your purpose and why you're here.
What's funny is you talk about having contentment in any situation. I was reading something, and I don't know if it's exactly true, I find it kind of hard to believe, but they said that current levels of depression are so high that they rival those of Jews in concentration camps during World War II. That's pretty crazy, considering what they were going through. Not knowing if tomorrow somebody's going to come in and drag you into a shower and gas you, right? And yet we're so depressed, and why is that? We have things. We have everything we could possibly want. I've been extremely blessed to visit other places in the world and see what true poverty looks like. See what it is to have nothing. See mothers in dirt with their kids, and when they're begging, they're not going over to their Lexus afterwards and be like, okay, that was pretty good. That's a good day's haul. So they have nothing, like real nothing. And it says something that they still smile, that they still have joy, and yet we don't. And we have all this stuff, all these lovely little things, right? Tons of gadgets and trinkets and all these things that you can order, and we're constantly on our phones ordering new things, right? But why? Why are
Getting
people
further and
depressed?
further away from God. The society as a whole is getting further and further away from God. I mean, you used to be reminded every time you had jury duty or you went to the courthouse, there were statues and emblems and everything everywhere. We used to pray, when I was in school, we used to pray in school. Certain teachers would. Now you can't even mention God or Jesus in school, or, you know, it's like bringing a gun to school. It's the same thing. They'll ostracize you for it. But it's the fact that you can walk down the street and you have people that don't even know they're humans anymore. They're trying to act like cats and dogs. What kind of society, what does that show about society when we let that happen? And that's when it goes back to being part of the government and standing up, using your voice as a Christian to stand up for things. That's what we need to do. If we would all stand up and be active, be loud, not ugly, but be loud in what we believe, I think things would change in our society for the better.
So when you see Catman, or whoever it is, do you ask them why they're that way? Because honestly, that person's probably just looking for something. And I think the problem is that we look at the person, what is wrong with you? We know what's wrong with them. We got the answer because we got the answer to what's wrong with them. And then instead, we're like, all right, well, that person's messed up. Let's move right along. When we need to be like, I got something for you. It's right here. Let me show them work. And it's an uncomfortable situation, right? It's really uncomfortable to talk to people about why they're weird. If you look at it, so it's pretty much societal norms. Well, we don't have societal norms as much anymore, and so you don't really have the establishment of you're supposed to be like this. We don't know what we're supposed to be like. And we keep saying that we should love one another, but we really don't. I mean, there are tons. I see t-shirts every single day. Love, be kind, all this stuff. Why do we have to print it on a t-shirt? Shouldn't it just be intrinsic? No, we need constant reminders because we're not showing love, because people don't know what love is. People think that it's just accepting you the way you are. Yes and no. Accept a person the way they are, with the caveat that I'm going to help you get better and help you get to where you're supposed to be. Right? This isn't the style, all right? Got it. You're like this right now. How can I help you be better? How can I show you the right way? Yeah.
There's a song we sing, Just As I Am, and some people sing it's.
I'm sorry, I was looking at Kevin Shear with a list of songs was singing for him, so I'm like, is that on the list?
It's fine, that's a fine song. He's okay. Just as I am, and it's a wonderful sentiment. Some people had a problem with it, but it really isn't. It said, just as I am, I come to Christ. And now you have to change. That's really what it is that otherwise we will not approach people that are in certain sins that's, well, I'm not going to approach. Like, that's a hard study, but they still need it. And it said, yes, you can come to him as you are, but it is at the point of conversion. Because yes, there's baptism, that's the physical sign, but the repentance that happens, that's part of salvation. That's why it's like, you will now be changed. And why? And how do we know this is true? Because you have an old man, and you have a new man. And so that shows there is going to be a change, but we still have to find people as they are, show them the truth, and then we actually don't convert people. I've gotten rid of that from my language. It says in Acts that the word converts people in 1 Corinthians, and the word does the conversion of it. So we just show them, and so we let God's word do the rest.
Which means we have to be patient, right? Because love is what? Patient, right? So we have to be patient, and you can't go hard and paint with somebody who's like way over here. You got to bring them in gently. And how do we do that? By showing them through us, through the way that we behave. This is the way I am. And then they start to ask questions. Okay, well, why are you this way? And it goes back to the whole lesson of showing Christ in every single situation that you're in life. Right. Anything else? Thanks for contributing. It's always good. It's much better when everybody contributes. Maybe next time, some other people who didn't. Maybe I'll just start calling on people. How's that? Like a t-shirt. It works. Yeah? It works? It works. Okay. Oh, then you won't know it's coming. That's even better. Everybody's got to be ready for the answer. All right, we'll do that next time. All right, thanks so much.